How you doing, Doc? Thanks for coming on to the Stop Chasing Pay podcast. I'm so
Oh my
excited to have you on the show.
man, it is a huge honor for me. I was saying before we went live that I follow along to all your Instagram do at home. So I'm slapping my lymph nodes and moving my superficial skin around and all the things you say, I just do.
I love it. Well, we were joking around before when we came on that I told you I'm stalking your Instagram page, but in a healthy way. And and all the stuff that you do about hormones, and you just did a really wonderful Q&A where you answered questions from your followers on there, which was great. And then for anybody who's tuning in, you'll get a link directly to Dr. Carrie's Instagram page, because I can't recommend it highly enough. But what I want to start out with here is just the two things that you have written on your Instagram page, which really grabbed me. The first one is, I know hormones, which is fantastic because that's a subject that can explode your brain. I remember endocrinology in chiropractic school, and that was a brain bender. And then you put in here, I want you to know them too. So that I really liked. And then the one that goes hand in hand with, this is a huge one for me. Don't accept, quote, you're fine, unquote, if you don't feel fine. Tell me about those statements and why you chose those, because they really resonate.
Absolutely. So I graduated from school in 2005. So I saw patients Monday through Friday for years and years and years. And I had predominantly women, but some men would come see me. And it was always the same story. I feel like crap. I don't know why, but I know my body and nobody will listen. Or their GP or, primary care would run a white blood cell, a red blood cell, a cholesterol, and call it good. Like, oh yeah, you're normal. I'm like, well, your cholesterol is normal, but like they didn't bother to look at anything else. And I've had a number of women that were told, my gynecologist said hormones vacillate too much, so we're not going to test them. Or they'll test randomly. When did you get your hormones tested? I don't know, Tuesday at 3. Like, no, they do follow a cycle. We've got to narrow it in. And so just having year feedback from really frustrated patients, and I'm sure you can totally relate, that I just really got into education. And I realized if I could explain what was happening in their body, even the complex stuff, but just bring it down to a simple level. Here's what's happening. Here's why you feel like crap. Here's what I see. Then they were so empowered. They were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to put this on the refrigerator. I'm going to tell my partner and my family and my best friend, like this, I just learned this and I'm going to do research into this and I'm going to get better. But not knowing, not having any idea, not getting that kind of education, then they felt sort of lost and disempowered. And so that's been my whole goal with really everything I do now. And when I saw patients and on Instagram, is that I want to take what I know and make sure you know it too, because then you'll be empowered.
Yeah, I love that. So when you went to your training, did you specialize in go back and specialize in the hormone work after you graduated?
Right from the get-go, I knew I wanted to be in women's health and hormones. So okay. I did my residency in women's health and hormones and endocrinology last year, within a year. The naturopathic community, we have a few board certifications. We have an oncology. We now brand new have endocrinology. So I'm now took the test. I am board certified in naturopathic endocrinology. And I'm the medical director of a hormone lab. So I'm around hormones. It's what I know. That's why I put that statement. It's what I know. I don't know anything about pediatrics. I don't know anything about your hurt knee, but I do know hormones.
Well, I mean, if the hormones can make a contribution to that hurt knee. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a big one.
Absolutely.
I mean, so many people are suffering in chronic pain when they come to see me, and everybody goes at it from a musculoskeletal standpoint. I don't see many people addressing it from the other systems of the body. Have you seen a big role in that in relationship to pain, not just in women's health issues or things like that?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Everything from just like sort of general muscle aches and pains, joint pain, frozen shoulders. Women head into menopause and they're losing out on estrogen. They think frozen shoulder is all musculoskeletal. I have to get a prednisone shot. And I'm like, whoa, we know what's going into frozen shoulder as women get older. Even just joint pain in general, as women head into menopause, that loss of estrogen coupled with other things, they lose that lubrication and they get a lot of pain. And then just healing, right? This, just tissue repair, when people have high glucose and, have testosterone issues and they have cortisol issues and adrenaline issues. And, it's just, they're going to be slower to repair, slower to heal. So now they work out, they pull a muscle, it takes them forever to get better. So they don't work out through that whole time. And it's just like shampoo, it's rinse, wash, rinse, repeat over and over. And they just get these chronic injuries repeatedly.
So I'm going to ask a question. I don't even know if there's an answer for it, but it just seems like human beings have, hormone systems that are in absolute chaos. And I'm just wondering, is it always been that way, or why in the world is everyone falling apart? You know what I mean? Is it coming down to just the overall stress that humans are under all the time, and that is just killing our hormone system?
Well, I would say in the year 2020, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
This has not been a great year.
Little cortisol action going on,
it's just little issue there. But I would say, what I notice is just the lifestyle stuff, the basic stuff, getting good sleep, eating nutrient dense food, moving your body, working on your stress, relationships, all of that just seems to just get worse and worse and worse. Our exposures, right? Our toxic exposures have just gone way up. And I think there is a lot that's happening in our society, in the world, and that's the body is reacting the best that it can. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, the reaction is chaos. The body is rapidly trying to manage the fact that you are staying up late, you are not sleeping well, you are not eating well. This year is terrible. It's trying to fend off diseases. It's trying to detoxify toxins. You won't stop drinking that wine. It's just it's go, go, go. I'm always busy. There's that phrase, I'm busy is not a badge of honor, right? But it constantly perpetuates our stress system on top of everything else. And our hormones are, they get, just like they chaos ensues. Chaos ensues, especially in men and women when it comes to reproductive hormones. Reproduction, while at the center for women in particular, whether we want to get pregnant or not, it doesn't matter. That's what's at our center. But it's not critical to life. So if it's more important to divert the energy and the resources to survival, breathing, heart, things like that, brain, then women start to notice they have all of these hormonal reproductive issues. Whether it's their cycle, their PMS, their fertility, their energy, their mood, everything gets affected. And
I imagine that's the same for guys too, right? Then because they're going in their testosterone levels, and because I know for me personally, I had autoimmune disease about 5 years ago that they still never found a name for, but my levels of testosterone were significantly low. I know when I had mine tested, it was at 76. Like,
wow,
76. Yeah,
wow.
I know. And I'm like, how the hell am I still standing?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And we're seeing that in men younger and younger, right? I tell men all the time, if you have low testosterone, maybe like in your 20s or your 30s, don't accept, oh, you're too young for that. That's what drives me nuts. And in men and women's health, it drives me nuts when conventional medicine says, like to women, I have women in their 20s with hot flashes. Oh, you're too young for that. No. They can absolutely have hormone imbalance at any age. And it's the same for men. I'm not saying it's healthy. Don't get me wrong. Men in their 20s should not have low testosterone, or 30s. or even 40s for that matter, but we're seeing it more and more. And it's getting blown off, I guess, or pushed off, or, you know, oh, just rest more. I'm like, no, there's something serious going on. We need to evaluate.
Yeah. So is that something that's changing in the medical community to be more alert with these hormone issues? Because what you said before, you know, people come into contact with these doctors who say you're okay or you're too young.
So labs are recognizing it. So the lab, like for example, studies show that if you got your blood drawn, if you were a man and you got your blood drawn for testosterone 15 years ago, let's say you were a 50-year-old man 15 years ago, and then 10 years ago, men in their 50s got their blood drawn, and then 5 years ago, men in their 50s got their blood drawn. They show that testosterone in men as a population is declining. And so a man in his 15 years ago had way higher testosterone than the man in who was 50 5 years ago. And so the labs know it. But in conventional medicine, when you have about 6 to 8 minutes per visit, you can't really accomplish a lot other than like a quick throat swab. You know, it's like, it's usually quick, acute care medicine. It's hard to fit chronic, I don't feel well care into under 10 minutes. And I don't, I have a number of, you know, MD friends, or even nurse practitioner, PA, who are in that model, and they're just as frustrated. I mean, they're like, what we expect us to get done in 8 minutes? So I can't ask them about their life history and their stress and their sleep habits and their diet and their exposures in 8 minutes. Like, I have enough time to suggest a few blood work, maybe some medication, and walk out. And it's doing a disservice, unfortunately.
So is doing a blood test the optimal way to assess the hormones that people have?
Some hormones, yes. So like thyroid hormone, the gold standard is in the blood. For men, the gold standard is still the testosterone in the blood. Yeah, absolutely. And now cortisol, no, cortisol, the gold standard, is not in the blood. With cortisol, we either look at saliva testing or we look at what we call dried urine testing, because you can do it at home multiple times in the day, and that gives you your pattern of cortisol throughout the day. Nobody ever really wants to go get their blood drawn 4 or 5 times in a day to look at cortisol. So it's much nicer to do it through saliva or through urine. And then with women, when we're looking at like estrogen is a great example. So estrogen can be done in the blood, it can be done in the saliva, and it can be done in the urine, but only in the urine do we get what we call metabolites. So you make an estrogen, where does it go? So it's like it's the next step. It's what we call the phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism of estrogen, which is really nice for women to know. We're trying to, you know, mitigate cancer risk, and we're trying to, you know, reduce PMS and, you know, eliminate our heavy periods. And so getting that extra information can be helpful. So it is definitely a hodgepodge of how you would test.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So let's see how I want to go at it. Let's talk about the DUTS test, because you work with the DUTS test, which I recently got exposed to when I got sick to look at things, because you know, most of my stuff was done through the blood. I was having cortisol issues, and I was doing injectable testosterones, which to bring my levels up, but as you know, it's going to drive you down the estrogenic pathway. And then I had to say, okay, well, where is it sending that stuff? Like, which direction on that pathway I needed to know? Because I've had cancer in the past. 18 years ago, I had thyroid cancer. I do not have a thyroid gland. It's completely gone. So I'm on levothyroxine and stuff like that. But, you know, nobody had ever told me to look at that. So let's unpack the DUTS test of the cortisol, of why that's optimal. And then let's kind of get into that estrogenic pathway too, because with so many people that are stressed out today and just on the edge, you know, this cortisol thing is huge, and I don't think that people know what to do with it.
Yeah, and you know, I get asked like, what's your favorite supplement and what's your favorite nutrient for cortisol? and I'll, you know, I'll tell you the secret sauce right here. Nobody wants to hear it because it's very simple, but I'll tell you the secret sauce. Cortisol works on what we call a circadian rhythm. So it should be elevated in the morning. And that rise in cortisol is called the cortisol awakening response. It gets your behind out of bed. It reduces inflammation, it fights off infection, and it handles the fact that you have not eaten all night long. And so it gives you a little bit of glucose so that you can either get up and get going and eventually have breakfast. And then gradually your cortisol falls down, down, down through the day. So it's really low so that you can fall asleep at night. And at night, that's when your melatonin comes out. So your cortisol is like the sun in the day. Melatonin is like the moon at night. So this rhythm is set by something in your brain appropriately called the clock gene. You have a clock in your brain that masters your rhythm, and it is set, we call it entrained. It is set by lightness and reset by darkness. So for humans, what I tell them is in the morning when you get up, I want you to have full spectrum light exposure on waking, whether it's you open your blinds and your curtains, whether that means you go outside for a couple minutes because it's a sunny day, I have a full spectrum light box. I spent $20 on Amazon. I have a box that I turn on when I get up in the morning, and it mimics, quote unquote, the sun. And that shines into my eyes up to my clock gene to say, go now, let's do it now, reset it. At night, darkness. So people who are up on their phones, on their computers, watching Netflix, all the lights are on in the house. They're all super stimulated, and then they try to go to bed. Some people really struggle with that. They sleep with night lights. They sleep with multiple electronics in their room. So every electronic has a little light that's glowing. Like darkness. If you are struggling with your rhythm, with your energy, you want to be light in the morning and dark at night. But if you want to know for sure, like, well, what's my cortisol look like? That's why we test. That's why we do that extra testing. So a blood test, like you had said you had, when you draw your blood in cortisol, or draw cortisol in your blood, it's what we call total. And so it's all your cortisol that's either bound or free and available. So the free and available cortisol is what can bind to receptors and do the things. The bound up cortisol cannot. It's bound up. It's just like on a bus traveling through your bloodstream. So if you get a value of 10 in your blood work, you don't know if that's 9 on the bus and 1 free, or 9 free and 1 on the bus. But when you do saliva or you do urine cortisol through the day, then you get you can get the split picture. You can see what's actually free and available to bind to receptors and do the things. And because you can do it at home, you can, with saliva, depending on the company, you can spit a tube. At Dutch, we have little cotton swabs you pop in your mouth. It's really easy. Urine, it's easy. You collect your urine. You basically urinate on little pieces of filter paper throughout the day. And that gives us what do you do in the morning on waking? What do you do a couple hours later? What do you do around dinner? What do you do before bed? And then when you wake up, if you have insomnia, what's going on there? And we basically graph out your cortisol for you, and we can tell you, oh, you're too low in the morning. That's why you're tired. Ooh, you're too high at night. That's why you can't sleep. But we need to address those causes first. Why? Why are you low in the morning? Why are you high at night, before we just slam a person full of supplements?
Right. I think that's really important, because just like a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, you're low, let's make it higher. You're higher, let's take it low. But there's always this swinging balance, yin and yang pendulum effect that has to happen.
Absolutely. Especially the low, for example, really common reasons for low cortisol in the morning: sleep apnea and snoring, or people who maybe are light sleepers, and yet they're like their dogs in bed with them, or they co-sleep with their kids who are moving all over the place. So they're constantly getting woken up through the night. And maybe that's where they are in their life right now. Like, well, look, I have a new baby. I co-sleep. My partner and I co-sleep. So that's just what it is. It's like, okay, well, there you go. That's the reason for your low cortisol. The sleep apnea, the snoring people, I'm like, hey, look, that decrease in oxygen up to the brain at night is affecting the way the signaling for you to make cortisol in the morning. Let's get addressed. Let's figure out, why are you snoring? Why do you have sleep apnea? Why do you mouth breathe, as an example, and get that evaluated, because maybe you don't need any supplements. Maybe we just need to address the snoring and the sleep apnea. And so sometimes it's mind blowing to people, because they're like, you mean I don't need to take ashwagandha or rhodiola or all these ginseng, I'm like, well, you can, but it's not going to fix your snoring. And that's the problem, or your sleep apnea. That's the cause. That's the root. So let's get to that.
Well, I love that. It's peeling back the layers and going down to some basics and fundamentals that a lot of people are missing in their life. Because I have people that come on in and they're on multiple stimulant supplements.
Mm-hmm.
You know, almost every single one you just mentioned, they're highballing.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and they still, because they feel like, we'll just reach for like a glandular or something for your adrenal glands and things like that. It's just peeling back and going more to these lifestyle habits and things like that. So what do you find? Because here's the thing I found about cortisol. What you mentioned, cortisol itself isn't a bad hormone. I mean, people,
it's not,
right?
Yeah, it gets vilified. And I understand why. Everyone's like, oh, I have belly fat, it's my cortisol. I need cortisol to be alive. And cortisol wants to reduce inflammation, and cortisol wants to help you balance your blood sugar. In fact, I remind people of this all the time. Cortisol is what's called a glucocorticosteroid. Because glucose management is its number one job. And I think people really associate, as they should, cortisol with stress. But I'm like, well, actually, on its resume, on its CV, under the like subsection of, capabilities, like what you're good at, it's glucose management. That's what it prefers first and foremost. And so if you have poor glucose management, if you get hangry and then you stuff yourself full of sugar and carbs because you're so hungry, like like the Snickers commercial, have a Snickers, and then suddenly they're not hangry anymore. But now you've just gone from low blood sugar to too high blood sugar. Or maybe you're pre-diabetic or full-on diabetic and not being managed very well. Your cortisol is going to be haywire. And the opposite's true. If your cortisol is haywire, if you're not sleeping well, handling your stress well, dealing with 2020 well, which I understand is really hard, trust me, you're going to struggle with your blood sugar too, because you can't fix one without the other. And the body's cortisol is trying to protect you. It's not trying to be a bad thing. It doesn't want to put belly fat on you, but it is doing what it knows how to do in the moment.
Yeah, and it's such an important thing for the glucose is for people who have these metabolic disorders, and I see that a lot with brain issues. They're getting the brain fog, fatigue, tiredness, all that sort of stuff. Because the glucose is huge. People think, just muscle stuff, and that's a big thing for the brain.
Huge, huge. Especially, there's a really great book. There's a neuroscientist, PhD neuroscientist, Lisa Mosconi. And she wrote the XX Brain, right?
She was on a podcast already. She was on the show.
Oh, she was. Of course she was. Of course she was. So I have been following her for a while because she talks about how to make glutamate in our brain, which is our excitatory neurotransmitter, we need glucose. And so glutamate also gets a very bad rap. I mean, for good reason. If glutamate goes too far, it kills neurons. So we don't like that. But glutamate is involved in pretty much everything we do, to lift that pencil, to go for that walk, to think about that, to, have that conversation. Like, you need glutamate to be firing because that's what keeps you going. But if you don't have the glucose entering into the cycle that makes glutamate, then that's when you get the brain fog. That's when you can't remember names and you're tired and you can't read for very long. You could go for a walk, but reading a book is a struggle. You start making lists because you're like, man, I used to remember, but now I rely on lists all the time. And in her research, as I'm sure she said, now I have to go listen, of course, women, as they get older and they lose that refined ability to get glucose into the brain effectively. And so women are notorious as they get into menopause for brain fog, which is not fair. It sucks.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Let's get into the estrogen a little bit there, because estrogen, you hear that word, a big one for women, of course, but that was a big issue that I had problems with too, for me, because of the testosterone pathway.
Aromatizing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always shared my history with everybody very open as well. And I had really bad prostate issues for many years, where prostatitis and BPH as well. Mm-hmm. So I've got a lot of wonderful things happening for me. But let's talk about that estrogen pathway a little bit, and let's unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in both men and women, believe it or not, we make estrogen through that little enzyme called aromatase. So in women, specifically in our ovaries, to make our hormones, it's a 3-step process. So we have one cell that makes testosterone, DHEA, and another hormone called androstenedione. They float over to another cell and they aromatize into estrogen. So that's where women in the cycling years get most of their estrogens. And then those 2 cells after ovulation magically transform, like Cinderella and her fairy godmother, into a cell that makes progesterone. And so it's this 1, 2, 3-step process that women make: androgens, estrogens, and progesterone. Unfortunately, though, with estrogen, we then have to, like any hormone, but estrogen's the big one that we all talk about, you have to detoxify it out of the body. So now that the body says, okay, I'm done with you now, you can go, it goes through predominantly the liver for your first and second step, and then through your intestines for the third step. And if you have blocks or genetic issues or certain nutrient deficiencies or toxins or alcohol or anything that kind of gunks up the liver, or maybe you have parasites or candida or Crohn's disease, or you're eating gluten, but you know you shouldn't in the intestines, all of that will affect how you do or do not process your estrogen. And if you don't process your estrogen well, then you run the risk of reabsorbing it. So now it's back in your body and maybe causing some of those symptoms like PMS or heavy periods or fibroids. In men, it causes weight gain in the belly. It can cause depression and memory issues and erectile dysfunction. Or it runs the risk of course, cancer risk in both men and women. And so with women, we tend to think, of course, breast cancer, but also uterine cancer, cervical cancer, vulvar cancer can be estrogen related. And so we want to make sure those pathways and those 3 steps are smooth and easy and correct and unblocked to get estrogen out. Same for men.
Yeah.
It's the same for men.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, there's so many estrogenic toxins in the world today coming out from outside, the exogenous toxins, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
which is one of the
right
things.
I'm sorry, that right there can be a lifestyle factor to make a difference of where you're getting your estrogen from.
And where I was saying earlier that labs have known that men's testosterone is decreasing over the years. Environmental estrogens is one of the big factors. That's what they say.
Interesting.
And so men exposed to either in utero or as they're getting older, as they're exposed to parabens and phthalates and fertilizers and all this stuff that can act estrogenic, it's a real problem for them, not only their testosterone, but their sperm production as well. And it's in everything. I mean, I don't think people realize, I was reading, actually last night, I got a question about toluene, because it was in an antifungal, like the antifungal spray, for people's feet, athletes' feet, right? Mm-hmm. So many men and women, but a lot of men, they just buy the spray and spray their feet because of the gym or sports or military, whatever, because they got athletes' feet. So I'm reading the ingredients, and one of the ingredients is called BHT, which is a toluene. And when you look it up, it's like, well, in mouse and rat studies, it's linked to cancer, and it's linked to respiratory problems if you get it in. And while of course, like a little bit's fine, a lot of it's not fine. But so if you're doing it every day because you're not getting to the root cause of your athlete's foot, and you've been doing it off and on your whole life because you've played sports forever, and you go to the gym and you forget your flip-flops when gyms were open, and it's like, well, build up over time, or the things that hang in your car that smell, the people hang them off the rearview mirror, and like that fragrance is estrogenic, right? And people like good smelling things, or they want it to smell like leather, or they want it to smell like musk, or they want it to smell like Christmas. And like that fragrance, that generic fragrance they have in there is actually estrogenic, and it's filling your whole car and it's permeating into you. And it's just one of the many things you have to think about. I'm not saying it's fair or nice or fun, because Christmas smells good, but it could be contributing to your health.
Yeah. I'm amazed that the human body is alive at all. you know.
I agree. I mean, if our liver could talk, our liver would be like, knock it off.
Let's talk about that. I mean, is there anything that we know the crucial role of the liver, right? And I know with the Dutch test, you can look at some methylation in there. Are there other ways that you, with what you do, can assess how that liver is going for its role with detoxification and hormones?
I mean, actually, some of it is symptomatic, for sure. You know, there are people listening right now. And if I were to say, if you got in that car with that person who had the thing hanging up that smells like Christmas, what would happen? And they'll go, oh my gosh, I'll get sick. I feel nauseous. I get a headache, right? They react to fragrance right away. Somebody's burning a candle and they're like, nope, can't handle the candle. I'm very reactive. That usually indicates a liver issue, because to process those chemicals, when it goes through phase 1, they get stuck at phase 1 and then they recirculate. So you get like this double, triple whammy back in your body. And so sometimes just alone based on symptoms, how do you handle, it will tell me if they have a liver issue. Even things, bile, you know, have you had your gallbladder out? Oh, you don't have a gallbladder. Okay. Or no, I still have my gallbladder, but man, I get gallbladder pains all the time. I have sludgy gallbladder. My stools are weird. They're, you know, orange colored sometimes, they're white sometimes, they're loose a lot. You know, just some of these key questions. I'm like, I think something liver gallbladder is going on, and that's so critical for detoxification of everything, literally everything. I tell people everything you eat, drink, breathe, or swallow has to go through detoxification. And so we talk about estrogen right now, but you know, you forget it's also the skincare that you put on. It's the hand lotion, right? It's the lip balm you put on. It's the thing you just sprayed your counter down with to wipe up the mess you made. All of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I get my charger. I might lose my.
Oh no, can't have that.
If I drop, I'm gonna come back on and I'll get you with the other computer.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that poor liver, right? And do you believe that the liver can be detoxification through the liver? I mean,
we can improve it. So we can definitely improve it. I mean, it's interesting, you know, conventional medicine will say, you know, the liver is born, it does its job. You don't need to support it. You don't need any extra supplements. But we know a lot of things go into liver health. We know things like choline and B vitamins and taurine and glycine. And we know certain foods are really helpful. Beets and the brassica family, your broccoli, your kale, your cauliflower, your onions, your garlic, like all of these things offer the nutrients, the cofactors, the enzymes that are liver supportive. And so I'm like, well, why not support it? You know, especially with everything we're up against now. And then on top of it, you know, when you add in alcohol, my women population, mostly because I would see women, they would try really hard to justify their wine habit with me. And they would say, well, Carrie, I do organic, biodynamic, low sugar wine. And I'm like, that's amazing. So do I. But it still has to get processed through the liver, and you still have estrogen issues. You just told me you have PMS or heavy periods or bad hot flashes or whatever weight gain. So maybe that alcohol is holding you back. Maybe we need to stop it for a while, work on everything else, and then maybe revisit that later. And the number of women who've come back to me and astounded. Oh my gosh, I was only having 1 glass of wine a night. I had no idea the effect it was having on me. I sleep better. My PMS is better. I'm not puffy anymore. I've lost some weight. I'm like, I know. It affects the way you process in the liver, and alcohol is going to win. It's bigger, better, and stronger. So it's going to push everything else to the side, and now it recirculates.
Yeah. I mean, do you find that a significant amount of people have a methylation gene issue? It seems to be so prominent.
Really prominent. Yeah. So that's, for those who are listening, that's the big one we're talking about is called COMT, the COMT. And COMT is what takes your phase 1 estrogen metabolites and neutralizes it into a phase 2 metabolite called a methoxy. And so if you have a slow COMT, you're going to be slow to methylate. And that means it just stays as the phase 1, and then it recirculates and can cause problems. Yeah. But a lot of people, not only a lot of people have the mutation, but you can do things to slow it down. So being like a heavy, like green tea, unfortunately, green tea itself can slow it down. Being estrogen dominant or being on the birth control pill, taking estrogen more than you should will slow it down. Those who are on SSRIs or SNRIs that raise your serotonin blocks one of the receptors in COMT, so it can't work as well. And so I'm not telling anyone, don't just stop. Don't listen to this and be like, oh, I have to stop. Do not stop your SSRI or SNRI. But just know if you're having some estrogen issues and it could be contributing to this enzyme. Now there's ways to speed it up too, because people say, well, what do I do? I'm like, well, we just biohack the reverse. Like we just try to speed it up. We support it. And try, if you need to stay on your antidepressant because that's saving your life, fantastic. Then we'll just do all the things to help support your COMT instead.
Yeah. So those are really powerful things.
It's a puzzle. It's putting together a big puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that was a big discovery for me overall. My illness of really looking at the other systems of the body. When somebody would come in to see me with chronic pain somewhere, I honestly really never looked at the liver as being any issue in there. And then now I pretty much check it on everybody. And
now you preach it. The liver, the
lymphatics.
Yeah.
I make a joke that everybody's got a liver problem. They just don't know it yet. It's like, where is it along that spectrum? And I've seen it as tied quite a lot to people who have right-sided shoulder issues or hip issues and things like that. So yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's mind blowing. Like watching you on Instagram when you point these things out in your little 30-second or 1-minute snippets, your IGTVs, and then I'll repost it and I'll get messages from people going, I had no idea. That makes so much sense. Like, wow, nobody's ever talked about this. No one's explained this to me. Nobody's pointed this out. And so I think that's huge. I think it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, just some of these things that you've said already are transformational, life-changing for people. And what are some of the hormones that you see on the radar a lot that people should really be taking a look at? I know all of them are important, otherwise we wouldn't have them. But I mean, there's some that maybe people don't have any idea about or don't know what to do about.
Yeah, I was gonna say like an easy one would be like melatonin. Mentioned that earlier. The reason I like melatonin is a strong antioxidant, which we need right now. We need our antioxidants to improve our immune system and combating what we call reactive oxygen species that can go around and cause havoc in our body. But melatonin, it's made from serotonin. So it is part of that like serotonin pathway. So it has to do with brain hormones, but it's also really affected by light as well. And so it kind of goes back to that sort of the basics, sleep hygiene is what I say. And I notice melatonin is the worst in new parents because they're up a lot, which understandable, or just parents in general, because they get their kid to bed and then now they have this finite amount of time where they can get stuff done. And so they almost get a second wind and they're doing stuff, or they're watching TV, or they're paying bills, or they're on their computer, or they're on their phone because their kids are in bed and they're like ramped up. And then they try to go to bed and it's not the greatest sleep because they've just pushed off their melatonin production. I also see it in entrepreneurs though. Entrepreneurs work hard, they stop for dinner, maybe family time. And then the kids go to bed and they get their second wind and they're back on their computer, finishing up everything that they need to do for the night. And then they can't understand why they're not sleeping that great. And so with melatonin, yes, there are supplements, but if you really want to fix your melatonin, evaluate what do you do at night? Maybe should look into getting blue light blocking glasses. Maybe don't turn on every light in the house. Maybe cut the computer time and the TV time an hour or so before you want to go to bed. Read an old-fashioned book, like a real book that you have to open up and flip through, not an e-reader. And so some of these, they sound dumb. Nobody wants to do them. Nobody wants to get off of Netflix when they're trying to check out. But then I'm like, yeah, but you're also not sleeping and you're waking up tired, which affects your glucose. It affects your inflammation, affects your, right? Just the whole domino effect happens. So melatonin is a big one.
So it's okay to take a melatonin supplement?
I suggest people, I am okay with it as a Band-Aid, like while you're working on fixing your melatonin, but I definitely, unless you have the gene where they're genes where you struggle to make melatonin, I don't like it in the long term. I don't think it's necessarily in the long term. But everybody has different opinions on that. I will say, physiologically, which means, what does the body actually make? It's very little. Like physiologically, the body only makes about 0.3 milligrams, but everybody can buy a 1 milligram, a 3 milligram, a 5 milligram. But physiologically, it's really tiny how much melatonin we make. So I do think some people are over melatonin as well.
That's true. It can swing both ways. So,
yeah.
I'll tell you what, Doc, I'm gonna freeze it here for.
Yeah. Likewise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Talk about hormones. It reminds me, my favorite class, honestly, when I was in chiropractic school a few years ago, it was over 20 years ago, was my endocrinology class. It was very intimidating for me because there was just so much going on. And I remember my professor said one of the most profound things that stuck with me to this day, and I use it for everything that I said. He goes, listen, you're not going to be able to memorize hormones. You're going to have to understand how these interact with each other. You've got to understand relationships. And that was a big, powerful thing. It wasn't, you can't rote memorize these things. And that stuck with me. And then that's something that's been very fascinating to me about studying these, because each one of these plays such a critical role with each other and in balancing each other out. And is that one of the reasons that you ended up gravitating towards the Dutch test and working with them as a clinical director, because that helped you with a lot of things you were looking for?
Definitely. It's funny. So one of my professors said, humans are nothing but a bunch of biochemical reactions, she didn't say that to me until after I'd graduated. And at the time in medical school, nearly failed biochemistry. And I was like, dang it. I have to really learn and understand biochemistry, don't I? And get back into physiology. And she wasn't kidding. The human body is just a lot of biochemistry and physiology trying to do the best that it can. And so working with Dutch test, just one, gave me a whole lot more education. And two, just a whole lot more, when I peel back the layers of the onion of answers when it comes to hormones. Now, obviously there's more to hormones, as we've talked, like, yes, your progesterone's low, but why, like what's really ultimately the cause, but at least gives you that cursory look of, you're not crazy. This is why you feel like you feel, but so let's keep going. Let's dig deeper and figure out the why behind this. And, men and women love it when I can go, you're exactly right, your testosterone's low, or you're exactly right, your cortisol is really high at night, or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, thank you. It's just so validating. And then we can go from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what we talked about before, of having a really great history, asking great questions, because a lot of times you'll find the answer just from what they tell you, right? And it's just knowing where to look. But is there like a standard that you like for people to do on a test wise? Like, okay, this is a good fundamental screen that we would do to get a good baseline picture of your hormone profile?
Yeah, so I do. So if they come in specifically for hormones, and they're like, I need answers, I want to know what my hormone levels are, then obviously perks of the job. I do Dutch testing, but at the very least, if they're not going to Dutch test, I'm like, let's look at your estrogen, let's look at your progesterone, your testosterone, your DHEA. And for women who still cycle, you want to test those things in the second half of your cycle. So if you're a 28-day girl, you want to test around day 19, 20, or 21. So we're very specific where we test those things. I always look at cortisol. I want to see when cortisol is affecting them. I generally always look at thyroid as well, to see what's going on. So I'm looking at not just a TSH, but I'm looking at, the free T3 and 4 and antibodies if they haven't done them recently for autoimmune, which we talked a little bit about earlier. And then like general stuff, I generally run vitamin D. I generally run glucose and insulin. I generally run red and white blood cells. And then I add on from there. So if I feel like in addition, they need stool testing, let's say, I want to check them for, screen them for parasites, look for GI inflammation, then I will add in stool testing. In some women and men too, there's a hormone called prolactin. Prolactin is the prolactation hormone. It's what enables breastfeeding. But women and men can have it increase just mildly for a variety of reasons. Like a worst case scenario would be a tumor, but let's assume it's not a tumor. Stress will transiently raise prolactin. Hypothyroidism will transiently raise prolactin. And what prolactin does in women is it throws off their cycle. And so if she's like, I have really irregular, weird cycles, and I check her prolactin, I'm like, oh, you know what? You're not crazy. You've got this hormone. It's affecting you. Let's figure out why your prolactin is high. Oh, it's stress. Your cortisol is really high. Or, oh my gosh, you actually have a thyroid problem. And so it can help us. And the same for men. Prolactin affects their testosterone. It suppresses their testosterone. And men can have hypothyroidism. Men can have high stress. And so I can add in sort of these extra variables as we're getting their history and sort of going through things. Mold, right? At our break, Louise and I were talking about mold and water damage. And so I might say, oh my gosh, your symptoms and your history and that exposure sounds kind of mold or mycotoxin. Let's do a mycotoxin test and see what comes up. Lyme disease. Oh my gosh, so again, I have kind of a baseline that I form around. But just like you said, thorough history, symptoms are a huge part of it. And where we go really.
Do you find that most people, by the time they end up coming to see you, they have, because I find it a lot, low vitamin D in a lot of humans.
A lot. Well, I in the Pacific Northwest, and so we have low vitamin D because we're only sunny out the 5th July till like September.
Oh, I'm breaking up there.
I think I froze.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, it froze a little bit. Let's let it catch up a bit, and then think I lost. Yeah, just start with the vitamin D thing again.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that.
Okay. So I live in the Pacific Northwest and our vitamin D is low a lot because we only get sun like the 5th of July through September. And then it rains the rest of the time.
Right.
So it's tough for us. Although I know it's tough for the whole country, even sunny states, people wear sunscreen and they don't go outside. And vitamin D is a hormone. I think a lot of people forget it's actually a hormone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've had some people get it tested and they were like significantly low. Is there a number that you like that to be at for people, difference between men and women? Or because that's the thing too, right? Big spectrum of numbers in endocrinology.
That's the truth. Yeah, between men and women. But for vitamin D, I mean, I nowadays I'd like to see vitamin D, 50 or higher. And when I see people in the single digits, I'm like, whoa, way too low. Yeah, that's concerning.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think I saw something recently that they're tying vitamin D deficiency to something that may make you more vulnerable to the virus as well, which was quite interesting. I think Dr. Tina posted that up.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I want to ask you one more.
Yeah, a few people have posted.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one more thing before we start to wrap it up. And then it's something that I'm assuming, I think that the Dutch test still has it, and that's the organic acids test. Can you tell me a little bit about that one? That's a really cool thing.
Yeah. So we have extra markers that are related to hormones. So we have one marker is called an MMA, methylmalonate or methylmalonic acid. And it is a marker of adenylyl B12. So everybody talks about methyl B12, but it's actually adenylyl B12. Adenylyl B12 is the B12 needed for the Krebs cycle and your mitochondria and ATP production. And so, whereas methyl B12 does something else. And so that's a cool marker. We have 2 markers for vitamin B6. We have a dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine metabolite marker. And we have an DNA damage marker. So if your poor little DNA are getting attacked, they release a marker called 808G, and it's up in the urine. So the higher that is, the more concern I have for your DNA. So we've got quite a few number of cool extras on there.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. So if people are listening to this and they wanted to find somebody that can do and help them with, testing the Dutch test or hormones, it's not easy to find someone. Where how do they do it?
So we have a new feature. If you go to DutchTest.com, we have a find a provider feature. And so they can find a provider right in their area, and they can search by zip code or by city, and they can change mile radius. And so that's a huge help.
Oh, that's great. So if you guys go and you search around me, I should hopefully be in there, because
now I'm going to go check, because I actually don't know.
Yeah, because I'm a provider in there. I should be in there.
Well, now I'm going to make a note of it to make sure.
Yeah.
It's a brand new feature.
It might be under my legal first name, but many people don't know Perry is my middle name and John is my official first name. So if it's under John Nicholson, that's me. Yeah, same one.
Well, now people know.
Yeah.
So the feature just launched. It's brand new. We have found a few bugs because it is not listing everybody. So
yeah,
I made a note. Make sure you're in there.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Yes.
And listen, I had such a wonderful time. Thank you so much for coming on. I literally could just go all day. And I want people to be able to follow your work and learn more from you. What's the best way for them to do that?
2 places. I am DutchTest.com. Everything, all webinars, all podcasts like this one. We house, everything is for free. You don't have to be a practitioner. You can just be somebody who's really interested in learning and go to the website and learn. And the other place I hang out is Instagram. I'm a visual person. I love Instagram. So I'm at dr.carriejones.
That's right there, guys. If you look at my screen, there she goes with those great colors, the pink in there. And I got to say, I love the things that you post up there. Like this one, all I do is load and unload the dishwasher. That's a good one. I definitely feel like that one, especially since my son came home from college. But you have such a great way of mixing like a lot of educational things in there, but some lighthearted, fun things too. So guys, make sure you go check out Dr. Carrie there. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Oh, I appreciate that. I tell you what, the meme game in 2020 is strong. So it makes, we got to find the light. We got to find the humor in this year.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you sure do. And I will say that I go on that Dutch test all the time. You have some amazing educational content in there. And just to be able to take a look at and see a sample report of the complete Dutch test for men and women, it's like, wow, it's like so good.
Yeah, thanks. And we are currently revamping it. We're started now. We're going to go through 2021, just revamping all our education. So keep checking back. There'll be more. Absolutely. I sure will. And do you mind hanging on a moment so I can say goodbye after I sign off? Yes, of course.
Is that okay, Doc?
Of course. Yes.
Because we want to get a nice group pic that we can put up on Instagram too. So, all right. All right, everybody.
So if we don't take a picture, it didn't happen.
Exactly. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We are truly grateful and honored that you choose to learn with us on the Stop Chasing Pain podcast and share with everybody. Go visit the doc. You'll really learn a lot. She's a lot. She's a fantastic person. And as always, we tell you much love. We'll see you soon on the other side.